Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So whether you have a manuscript all ready to go, a book still stuck in your head, or maybe even 400 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer, visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so excited today to be joined by three authors who have unbelievably unleashed themselves, which you will soon discover. Michael Camarillo is the author of Keeper 829, which is the first book of the Keeper program. So we know there's plenty more to come. Raven Oak is the author of Amaskan's Blood, book 1 in the Boahim series. Again, lots to go. And that looks so exciting. And finally, Nathan Tudor is the author of The Empire's Lion, the Imperial Adept book 1. So we have 3 book 1s, so we know there's a lot more coming. We'll start with Michael Camarillo, and he writes of Keeper 829. In 2098, a shadowy organization called the Institution governs a harmonious collective society. The new faithless world is a veritable Eden, or is it? Naisha Gray looks human, but she's not. A letter and a stranger thrust Nisha into a darker reality where humans are a crop for reaping. In a world of betrayal, deception, and genetic engineering, Nisha finds her purpose isn't what she thought. Only questions remain. Who is coming? Are humans worth saving? And who are the real enemies? Please meet author Michael Camarillo. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for having me.
Oh, so excited to have you. Wow, I'm terrified already. First, I have to say, I absolutely adore your backdrop. Talk about being right with the theme. I mean, you're in the book right now, aren't you?
Oh, definitely. That's my life.
That I have to ask you, how do you get inspired to write something like this? I mean, was it a really bad dream, or did you get some really weird emails? What happened?
So I actually had so there's a whole bunch of different themes laced throughout the book of existential, philosophical, metaphysical. And that has basically been my life. I explain to people who ask me for my life experience, I say I've had the Jack Kerouac experience. And that's been in all facets, professional and personal. So I am very interested in religious and philosophical discourse, and that's what made me fall in love with my wife, because we had these deep conversations. And that really leads me down this path of wondering, about meaning and purpose to a almost obsessive concept where I'm always wondering, always questioning things. And really that's what led to this story.
Wow, I love that. And I love that that's what drew you to your wife. Yeah. As opposed to, she looked cute in a bar stool or whatever. No, it was all this discourse, all of this going back and forth stuff. Wow.
Oh yeah.
So you're the one who's always the ball of questions and the ball of answers.
Yes, both. Yes to both.
Now tell me something. This is book 1. Does that mean that you already plotted out the rest, or you just kind of knew that there was more to this story? So
I have plotted out, well, I didn't plot, so I'm not a plotter by any means, which is completely contrasted to my normal life. So I've gone through a yeah, that's I've transitioned drastically, and this story kind of codifies my personal growth and transition in my life. But I used to be extremely deliberate in my planning and meticulous in everything. Almost, I was diagnosed with OCD and anxiety. So I've changed a lot since then. But with the book itself, I have plotted a general idea, but I know where the story's going. I know where it started. I know the titles of the next 3 books, and I know where it's going to end. I know it's spoiler alert, it's going to end on a massive cliffhanger. So for those of you who like, you will love it. For those who don't, maybe not check it out.
I love that spoiler alert. No spoilers here. So 4 books total for this series.
Yes.
And how many are done already? And how many are still in process?
Two are done. One's with the editor right now. second book is Water 516, and that should be released later this year. And then I'm working on book 3 right now.
Okay. So you used to be an anxiety driven OCD, I'm going to plan everything to my life, and all of a sudden you became a pantser?
I don't know. So this book actually, the funny thing is I'm a huge history buff. So I love Anne Rice. Anne Rice is my favorite author, and I wanted to write historical fiction because I absolutely adore everything in history. I was an archaeology major. And that's where I started. But ultimately, this kind of just fell into science fiction by chance. I have no idea where the concept of keepers came from, none of it. Like genetic engineering, all that just happened. When you read it, there's a whole bunch of flashbacks that lend into my history love. So I do paint a very vivid picture of some historical reenactments. But in terms of sci-fi, it just came about.
Wow. The plotters of the world don't understand how things like that can just come about. How did you learn to let go of that part of you that wants to, plan what underwear you're going to wear 3 weeks from Tuesday? How did you let go of that?
How did you know that? Did I send that to your assistant? So yeah, I don't know. I think it was because I was going through a major transformation moment in my life, personally and professionally. And I needed, writing was really cathartic for me. I always had that, I loved writing throughout my life, but I never really thought, hey, I want to be an author. I always thought, oh, that's for someone else. I had a bunch of different goals. And I just started writing this story because, it was in my head. I was struggling. I was trying to find, my own purpose and meaning, and find, the sunshine in the clouds. And the story just started falling out. And as I was doing my own research, reading different books, more ideas just kept coming. And bear in mind, so I say I'm a pantser and I'm just writing, and I am, because I don't plot it in the conventional sense. But everything, whatever. I have so many pages and pages of chronological timelines throughout history dating back to 5000 BCE, where I went through and listed out everything, and then I picked out significant events that I like, and I went through and researched each one, and then I developed, when I had created my world and everything, I was very meticulous in that. But in terms of actually plotting the storyline, that didn't really happen.
Interesting that you'll do for one but not for the other.
Yeah, I'm into the research component. In terms of the writing, I think it was partly because I just wasn't confident in it, and it wasn't my goal to write it to be published. So I really had no idea. I learned a lot from book 1, and I'm doing, putting those into practice for book 2.
Fantastic. Would you mind my asking, you said there was a big work and personal transition. What was your work transition like?
So I was getting out of the military, and I was moving into, I had been in for 8 years, and I was moving into entrepreneurship and, self-employment. So that was massive. In addition to, my last duty station was in Germany, so I was moving back to the States. And simultaneously to all that, I was going through a pretty rough divorce. So yeah, it was a very rough time all around. But ultimately, I found my wife now, and I have 2 beautiful children, and life is wonderful.
Oh boy, do I love hearing that. Now, I know that you two met because you have a lot of shared vision and values. Did she read the books?
Yes. So actually, well, so the first book, I wrote the first 10 chapters by hand, and I read literally every single word to her. I read every single word of every single draft, every single chapter to her for book 1 all the way through. And when I finally told her, hey, the book's done, I need you to reread it, she was like, she's busy in school. And, she ultimately got to it. And I don't know if she's actually read the final draft, but I don't know. I'm not sure if she did. But with book 2, she is kind of my alpha reader. She's always there helping me from the get-go. But we made an agreement. She was like, I want to give you good feedback, because she's very educated. But she was like, I know where the stories are going if you're reading every single chapter to me. So it used to, I would type out the chapter and I would read it to her, and I make her sit there for 30 minutes while I read it to her. But now she told me, she was like, no more reading to me. Wait until you're done, send it to the editor, and then I will read it before you send it to beta readers. And I was like, okay. But I was so excited for the prologue in chapter 1. I was like, I gotta have you read this. She was like, no. So I had to sign a little agreement that said, only prologue and chapter 1 of book 2 I can read. So I read those to her, but since I have not read anything else to her. So.
Well, I have to admit, if somebody was reading an entire book to me, I think I would object also.
Yeah.
She wants you two to be married. She wants you not to be fighting, and that would definitely fight.
I know, it's just so hard because I'm so excited in the moment. I'm like, I just had this awesome revelation. I need to share it with someone.
Of course, no, and that's very cool, but you know, it's like enough, right?
Yeah.
I see up there Raven is laughing her head off when you were talking. I'm thinking that there's a story about somebody who doesn't want to read her.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming. It's coming. Well, I can't tell you how many times I will ask somebody, you know, did your husband read this? Did your wife? Yep, nope. They never read any of it. They have no idea. They have no idea I'm writing fantasy. They have no idea. It's very funny how in some relationships, and meanwhile, last week, I believe we had on a married couple who wrote together, they're still married. They're up to like book 4 or something in the series, and they're still married, which I'm thinking, good for you. More often than not, people are like, my husband doesn't even know what I'm doing in the basement. They have no idea. So I hear that your wife is trying to strike that eternal balance.
Yes, yeah, with that we do run, so we have a travel business that we run together, and we're literally like we are partners and everything. But I think she wants to give me a good perspective and not like she learned how the characters developed and saw the whole story develop, so it's kind of hard to give that feedback by the end when she's already like given her input. So she wants to read it fresh, you know.
Certainly understood. So tell me about these new books. I know 2 is done, 3 is with the editor, 4 is still just a pipe dream. Is it getting easier? Is it getting smoother? From book 1 to book 4, does it flow more? Is it worse because now you're like in so deep that you have to remember what happened? What's the jive here?
Yeah, I think it's going to be worse for book 3 because I did have to do a lot of Control F to remember what I mentioned in book 1, and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna confuse myself. But it was a lot easier. I wrote, so book 1 took me about 2.5 to 3 years to write. Book 2 took me 2 months, or about 3 months. But sorry, book 2. So it was a lot easier in that regard. I am still kind of, since I'm self-publishing, I'm trying out different things. So I did the standard past tense narration in my first one. In book 2, it's present tense. So I had to learn how to do that. That was quite the adjustment, but it's a lot more fast paced, a little shorter chapters. And, you know, I talked to my editor about making that jump, and there's reason for it with the storyline, but it was definitely easier. I did try my hand at plotting chapter 3, 4, and 5, and I fell off on that. So yeah, it just didn't work. But yeah, it's getting a little easier. I think book 3, I'm kind of in a hold pattern right now. 1, because I was moving this whole month, so it's been crazy, and I got bit by a dog and I'm recovering, so I can only type with one hand right now. But the other hold pattern is I got 600 words in, and then I'm kind of like, I ended book 2 in a spot that I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make it make sense. I know what I want to happen, but I want to make sure that logic is there, you know? So I have 2 different roads that I can go, and I'm trying to figure out which one to take. So, yeah.
Gotcha. I love when writers describe the actual process. Like, I'm doing this, and then I got to debate this. And, you know, you really feel like I want to read the book and hear line by line what was going on right here. But that was very cool what you mentioned about writing the first one in past tense and the second one in present, and what an adjustment you had to make. And one of the things you notice is that it's moving faster.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And certainly, you know, we have so many writers and prospective writers who watch the show. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's a huge thing for someone to consider, especially if they're saying, you know, wow, my book, I don't know, I can't put my finger on it. I'd like, you know, to light it on fire. Switching up the tenses, of course, consistently might be a great tip for them. So I love that. So
Yeah.
What's your timeline? When are we going to get to read these other ones? How soon? What do you think?
So I'm planning on book 2 to come out in December.
Okay.
And book 3, I don't know if I'm going to do 1 book a year or if I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 books next year. But right now I'm trying to give a little more leeway, little more lead time before I publish it. Because last time I finished writing, I think in September, got it to the editor in November and published in December. I learned some lessons from that. So I have it to the editor right now, and I'm going to try and slow roll in, even though I want to get it out now.
I know, it's not easy.
Right now I'm projecting December. You know, you can always sign up for my newsletter and you'll find out if it comes out earlier.
Fantastic. And thank you for the reminder for our authors to definitely go sign up for a newsletter. Go to michaelcamarillo.books.com. You can see all the books, all the dates of what's coming up, and sign up for the newsletter there. Thank you. Our next author, Raven Oak, is the author of Amaskan's Blood, which is book 1 in the Boahim series. And Raven writes, her name was Adelaide. She was a master in her field, one of the feared order of Amaskan. Those who were a danger to the little dozen kingdoms wound up dead by her hand. The order sends her deep into the kingdom of Alexander, away from her home in Sadai and into the hands of the order's enemy. The job is nothing short of a suicide mission, one serving no king, no god, and certainly not justice. With no holy order to protect her, she tumbles, dagger first, into the Boahim, Senate's political schemes, and finds that magic is very much alive and well in the little dozen kingdoms. While fighting to unravel the betrayals surrounding the royal family of Alexander, she finds her entire past is a lie, right down to those she called family. They say the truth depends on which side of the sword one stands, but they never said what to do when all of the swords are pointed at you. Please welcome author Raven Oak. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you.
So nice to have you, and what a storyline there! My goodness gracious! Did you take fencing lessons?
I didn't, but artists, being an artist as well as an author, artists use these posable figures to help learn, like if the arm is like this, how to draw it. I use those to act out sword scenes. So I will pose them, and they have even little attachable weapons and things like that. So, you know, you put the swords in there and you sit there and act it out. And yes, it looks like I'm totally playing with dolls, but I'm really thinking about what that body movement looks like and how do I describe that? So sort of.
Oh my gosh, you're like the first person who is ever using those moldable. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a fabulous idea. What kind of art do you do? Sculpture or?
I don't. I actually draw and paint.
Oh, okay. Okay. But draw and paint figures then, or?
Just about anything. You know, I haven't really decided if I want to focus on one thing in particular. So I've done, you know, people, I've done animals, I've also done fantastical or science fiction scenes. I've done fan art where I mix Doctor Who with Firefly or something like that. You know, I'm all over the place with art, but.
And your favorite medium? Are you in oil and acrylics? What?
I really prefer digital. I used to do a lot of stuff on paper, but I was always annoyed at trying to erase things and what erasers do to paper and to media. So it was kind of one of those things when I discovered just how powerful some of the digital pencils are and what you can do in there. And it's like, oh, I messed up, undo, redo that again. Oh my gosh, it changed my world. And suddenly I was enjoying art a lot more. So that's definitely my preferred medium.
That's fabulous. Yeah, I felt as if when I learned that Control Z was undo, I felt like my whole life had been up till that moment. And now I could undo.
Yeah. Well, it's like Control F for find, which, you know, Michael mentions. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so powerful to be able to find something or find and replace. And suddenly all of your Michaels become Kent or whatever. So yeah, totally.
That happens, absolutely. And with Control Z, you can undo up to the last 100 steps.
Mm-hmm.
You ever wish you could do that in life? Like, could I just undo? I didn't want to say that. Or you know, you're on the highway or on the grocery store and you pick the wrong line. could I just undo this last decision I made? It was not a good one.
Very
So
true.
and a writer. I love that. That's just fabulous. So tell us about the inspiration behind this book and this series.
Well, because I am a huge fan of science fiction and fantasy in general, one of the shows that I watched when I was in college was Leverage before they rebooted it. And I really liked that concept. If you've never seen Leverage, you know, this group of criminals decide to use their criminalhood for good and get justice for people who normally wouldn't get justice. And so you have this group who might go out and steal from, you know, this horrible corporation and give money to someone because that corporation killed their kid, you know, or ruin their business because of that. And I wanted to do something similar. I really wanted a fantastical world where there was this kind of mix between an assassin and a monk who had this code that they lived by, but they went out and sought justice. They thought they were doing God's work by seeking justice and taking out people, if necessary, who'd done horrible things. Because you know, if you live in a world with royalty, the king can sit there and go, oh, I'm going to order your dad dead because I don't like the way he looked at me. Well, that's not really fair. And so this group really goes out and seeks justice for anyone, and even if that's against a king. And I really liked that play on justice and what both justice and family mean and how all of those interwork together. And so that's kind of what spurred in my head this idea.
And so true. I mean, right here in our own, you know, unfortunately all too real world, there are so many people who need the hands of your justice out there.
Yes.
How's the writing going now? This is book one. How many will there be?
There's actually a trilogy in this main set. There's a couple of standalone books as well coming, and there may or may not be another set of trilogy in that world. We'll just kind of see how it goes. Book one's out, book two is out, book three comes out sometime probably late this summer. And then this one of the standalone books should come out around the holidays as well.
Now, a standalone book, but related to the trilogy?
Yes.
Like,
yes. So in book one, one of the main characters, not the focus, not Adelaide, but one of the other main characters became a fan favorite. She is in her late 50s. She's a warrior. She's very much a badass. I always envisioned her as if Xena Warrior Princess had made it to her late 50s. And she comes off that way in not just her personality, but in her having her own agency and just being her own person in a world that normally that wouldn't happen. And because the fans loved her so much, I decided, well, I need to go tell her backstory. And so the standalone, the first one, the standalone book that's coming out is basically her history all the way up to Amaskan's blood.
okay. And you said there are other standalones as well?
There will be. They're not out yet, but there are some other characters that I think also have basically told me I'm not going to have a choice and I need to tell their story.
I love the way you just said that. The character told you. And you,
well, this person didn't start out being a main character, and then she kind of took over as her own, you know, thing. And yeah, I'm not going to argue when a good plot line pops into my head. So
absolutely. And you know, people who don't write don't realize that a character can literally, you know, step up to the plate and be like, no, this is about me. Just like it has happened many, many times in television shows or movies that somebody who was a supporting character actually was the star.
Well, I mean, Xena started off in Hercules.
Yeah.
They weren't even sure she was going to be her own thing. And then she was so popular, they were like, well, hey, maybe we should do this.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Or, you know, way back when you had like, you know, Laverne and Shirley guesting on Happy Days. You know, it's been going on since the dawn of time that the sub characters, they get one shot and some of them rise to the occasion. So that's what happened in yours. You had a sub character who said, look at me, and they're getting their own stand.
Well, and we don't have enough main characters that are older than, you know, 20s, 30s. We just don't, especially ones that are strong, not just physically, but mentally strong and their own people. Typically, they're relegated to somebody's mom or the servant over down the corner, the cook or whatever. They're not really their own people. And that's disappointing because readers are of all ages. So we shouldn't just be focusing on YA or 20s. We should be looking at characters of all ages.
Well said. And the same with the television and movie industry as well. That's for sure. Well, tell me something. When people go find you at your website, what will they find there? Can they sign up? Are they going to see other books? What's there?
Yeah, I have a mailing list. It's called The Conspiracy because another name for a group of ravens is a conspiracy.
Ooh, I like that.
I also have a Facebook reader group that they can join. So all of those links and social media stuff are on the bottom of the page. I think the mailing list is on the top, but everything else is on the bottom. They'll also see that I've had short stories in over a dozen anthologies traditionally published, and 3 came out this year. So there's definitely some new stuff out there for them to discover. I also write, besides fantasy, science fiction. So they'll see some of my science fiction work, and then they'll also see on my bibliography what's coming this year and next year.
Fantastic. And I love that they can go over there and get involved, not just with a mailing list, but a Facebook group too, so that they can get into it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Our next author, Nathan Tudor, is the author of The Empire's Lion. And he writes, as an adept, Riva blasts fire from her hands and leaps over walls. But when her first solo mission leaves her half dead amidst a heap of massacred allies, she gets just one chance at redemption. The Empire orders her to crush the one kingdom she thought she would never see again. Talnus, the land of her birth, the land she left in chains. Standing in her way is the wolf, a vicious assassin hell-bent on killing adepts. And a single cut from his cursed blade will destroy Riva's magic forever. Even if she can survive, victory may come at a price too high to pay. Please welcome author Nathan Tudor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So great to be here. This is such a fun conversation. I love the roundtable aspect of it.
Oh, I do too. I love that. That's why I said, back before everything, when we were in studio, we'd all be sitting around, we'd be sitting on the sofa and drinking wine. Now, of course, the good thing about us doing this way is I'm in New York City. And where are you right now, Nathan?
I'm in Southern California. So yeah, this is nice.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael is in Texas and Raven is up in Seattle. So yeah, the couch is not quite as big, but we can simulate the whole wine thing. Where in Southern California are you?
I'm in Orange County, so it's about partway between Los Angeles and San Diego.
Sure, I know it very well. Well,
yeah.
So glad to have you here. And tell us a little bit about this book and what got the juices going on this. I mean, goodness, I'm scared.
Yeah, well, the idea is it's kind of a lot of ideas that hit at the right time from a lot of different places. So in college, I was a religious studies major, and so I spent a lot of time reading about ancient history, reading different mythologies, studying different cultures, and how they were shaped by not just material realities like wars, but also intellectual changes like religions and philosophies. And so when I sat down to write, it was kind of natural that all these different cultures from kind of the ancient Mediterranean, which is where a lot of my study was focused, would come forward in different ways and give me inspiration to create the world I did.
That's wild. A religious studies major now turned author and pieces of that. I think that's fabulous. It certainly gave you background, that's for sure. When you were a religious studies major, was it all the religions? Do you study like a little bit of everything and that's why you get an overview, or is it anything in particular?
So I did have a course in world religions, which is kind of the survey, and even then you can't hit on everything. There's too much, but
there's too many.
Yeah, one of my favorite classes for sure.
Absolutely.
But a lot of my coursework was in the Greco-Roman world and the ancient Near East. So everything from Judaism and Christianity to, Assyrian religion, Babylonian religion. Obviously, the empire in The Empire's Lion is based a lot on ancient Rome, and so that came forward a lot when I was world building.
Exactly. Now, this is book one of, how do you pronounce it? Is it Adept or Adept?
I say Adept, but I've heard it both ways.
Okay. Yeah. The Imperial Adept book one. How many books are there and how far along are you?
So it's planned as a trilogy. So you have The Empire's Lion book one. Right now, I'm working on book two, and then the series will finish with book three. But it won't just be that core trilogy. So I've already released the prequel to book one, which is called Adept Initiate, and that tells the story of how Reva got from, this small desert kingdom to serving the Empire, and the trauma, the choices she had to make, and what motivates a young girl to serve a world-conquering empire. And people tell me I was a bit harsh to her, but they also, they love how it drives her to grow. So the prequel is out, and then there will also be some, kind of like how Raven talked about, some standalones. There will also be, some fan favorite characters will get their moment to shine, whether it's, their backstory, how did they get to where they are at this point in the saga, or even, maybe here's a story going on at the same time in the world that doesn't fit into the main books, but could have some side relevance.
And tell me about world building. I always love that. How do you manage when you're world building as far as keeping track of things? Are you a spreadsheet guy? Are you post-it notes? Do you just have that kind of a mind? What do you do?
It's kind of funny. I'm almost the mirror opposite of Michael, who Michael was saying how he'll, discovery write a lot of his drafts, but have really meticulous history notes. I'm almost the inverse, where I'll plot my stories really meticulously, but the world building is kind of this soup in my head of like, I remember some detail from when I read, Tacitus' history of Imperial Rome, and then, that's going to come into, this war subplot. I remember this great image from the Aeneid, and that's going to slip in.
That's great.
I'm in between the two.
I love that. Well, that's the fun of this, is that you're all in a similar genre, but you approach it in a completely different way. And I always think that gives such permission to the writers who are watching, because people who are just getting started, they really want to hear somebody, one of the three of you, and they say, oh, that's what I'm going to feel comfortable with. Oh, that resonates with me. If everybody were a pantser and a plotter heard from you, they'd say, yep, can't do it. But it's kind of cool that everyone's a little different. Now, all of you have written more than one book. And I had asked Michael, I think, if it was getting easier or harder dipping into the series. I would think, sometimes people would say easier because the writing process, but it's harder because of the detail and what you have to remember. Nathan, how about you? Easier or harder with each one?
It's getting harder, I would say, especially, there's the minor details like what was this person's eye color, little things like that. But then there's also bigger things like, did I actually set up this plot hook, or do I have to introduce it from the start here? And things that I'm sure a lot of people would expect. Oh, he wrote the book, he knows. No, I really don't. I need to go back and check quite a lot.
I know people who check with their fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm very frequently making notes to myself as I'm drafting, check book one to make sure this flows together well.
That's
lots of placeholder names. Like, I don't remember what her cousin's name was, so we're going to call him Cousin. And, I'll fix that in the revision.
Fabulous. Raven, how about you? Getting easier or harder with each subsequent book?
Book two was easier for me. As I said about being in between the two, yes. I outline things, but I also I don't outline as in detail as some people. But when it comes to my series, I keep what's called a series Bible. And that has everything. I mean, every eye color of anybody I've ever mentioned. I mean, just anything that could be relevant at any point in time, it's in there so that I can go find it when I need it. And so for me, book 2 was easier, but book 3 is challenging because now it's, okay, I opened up all of these plot hooks and there's all these little subplots and all these things that I now need to come here. And making sure that I close all of those and that it pays off for the reader properly. That's a lot harder. I mean, it's easier for me to do it book by book, but doing it as a trilogy, that's a lot harder than I thought it would be. So it's been interesting.
And Raven, honestly, I don't know what color eyes people in my life have. So I'm dazzled that you remember to keep notes on it, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's important stuff. And like Nathan, I use brackets. So, you know, the weird little brackets, and I'll type things like, oh, I need to go look up this eye color and I'm too busy to do it right this second. Look it up later. And I'll make those notes. And then if I do Control F for find, I can find where all those brackets are and then go plug that stuff in when I'm revising and editing.
Well,
and you know, that's just what you do.
That's good to find the brackets before it goes to print and somebody writes in your book reviews, wonder why on page 30 they said I should go find out that eye color or whatever.
Or insert fight scene. Wait, where there's supposed to be a fight scene here? Huh. Yeah.
I had a really embarrassing moment similar to that. Thankfully, it was with the editor, but instead of brackets, I write the letters TK together because they just don't occur in English that much. And so it's really easy to do a control find on them. But one of them slipped by. And so it was a note to myself that was something like, check to make sure that I mentioned this culture elsewhere or earlier on. And my editor just puts a question mark on it. And I was, my face is all red as I'm going over his notes by myself in, late at night and goes, oh man.
Well, I mean, it coming from the editor is nothing compared to it coming from an audience.
Exactly. Well, that was the sudden moment of panic. It was, what if this had gotten all the way to print?
I know, and things do, when I'm working with authors, and of course, all of us want everything to be as perfect as possible. But my mother happens to be, to say that she's an Outlander fan is putting it mildly. My mother is obsessed with the Outlander series. And Diana Gabaldon just released her newest book, which is about that fat. And I don't know how they read it so fast, but I swear her Facebook feed was blowing up within hours with mistakes in the book. And I kind of felt, and this is nothing bad about her, I mean, things happen. I kind of felt better about everything I've done in my entire life after hearing that. I'm just like, look at that. Even her book has those kinds of things. It's definitely not easy. Any other scary stories, near misses? Oh my God, I can't believe I published that. Anything? What scariest thing that happened? I mean, some people who are afraid to publish, they're thinking it's like standing naked in the middle of a street to publish a book. And you three have done it. That's why I said before we started, you three represent like Mount Everest. You did the bucket list item. So you're here to show people that it can be done. Raven, anything terrifying happen in your author journey?
It wasn't me, but I will tell people, Neil Gaiman, huge, grandfather of, well, everything. Big name. People look at him like he is just God in publishing, and I love his work. I love him dearly, but one of his more recent books, very first page of the hardback, was a huge grammatical error, kind of like the equivalent of, I can't, don't want, or something like really horrible, just horrible.
Wow.
And I had to read the sentence several times and went, that really is there. So it really does happen to everybody, and it doesn't matter how many eyes are on that page, there will be things missed.
Absolutely.
It just will.
I just recently saw a Broadway show, and I won't throw the cast under the bus and say what it was, but I actually sat there saying, I'm on Broadway. I paid a lot for these tickets. I can't believe that just happened on stage. So things do happen. Michael, anything embarrassing, horrifying stories to tell, war stories, shall we say, about the publishing?
No, not too terrible. I mean, I think the point you bring up is, right on. I mean, everyone's human. I mean, it just happens. I had a lot of great reviews right off the bat, and then I had this one reader who, bless her heart, just absolutely amazing. She's gone through it so in depth that she sends me screenshots on Facebook Messenger with little errors that she finds. And it's like, hey, is this supposed to be there? Hey, is this supposed to be there? And I'm just sweating it like, they're very minor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we miss so many things? Like they're not huge, but there's just like one little thing here, one little thing there that she sees, or a little spacing that the printing didn't work out right. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I was freaking out. I was getting all upset. And my wife shows me one of her Anne Rice books where she like highlighted errors in that. And she was like, Anne Rice can do it, you can do it. It's okay. So it's
That's why I love to see the big ones have, their Facebook feed blow up with errors. It just makes the rest of the world look a little bit better. But Michael, I'll just say to you, be happy that she's just sending those screenshots on Facebook Messenger. I've had people actually post on my Facebook wall with what they think I should be doing with my life, shall we say. Nathan, how about you? Any terrifying near misses?
Nothing as bad as the editorial note, but I have had something similar where, I was getting messages. Thankfully, this is before I finished the print file. So this was just on the ebook version of, the small errors, and most of them were minor, but there was one that was a kind of embarrassing spelling error in, if not the most important scene in the book, maybe the second most important scene in the book. And so I was so grateful that I was able to correct that before I made the paperback file.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, it's certainly not easy, but that brings up social media in general. Just a question for three authors here. Social media, friend or foe? What are we and if friend or foe, do you have a favorite way of working with your fans? Do you have a favorite base, a favorite media channel? What is it for you? Michael, we'll start with you.
I think friend, at least aspect of, being a writer and being a business owner. In terms of personally, I stay far away from it. But I have all of them. I have Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm trying my hand at TikTok now. Actually, I was very shy. I do have YouTube channels as well. I was very shy at being on video until I was on a trip with my daughter, and she got my phone and did this video about our travel business and why it's so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this has to go on YouTube. So I started my channel that day, and I started it up for that. And since I've done a number of different video challenges, just building my confidence. And I don't know, I think TikTok is fun. But in terms of getting actual feedback, I think it's better on Facebook.
Okay, Nathan, how about you? What's been your experience?
I'm still feeling things out with social media. It's a mixture of fun, and also, I also tend to be kind of camera shy. So I've also been trying out TikTok, and I put a few videos, and I was kind of surprised because I'm used to, on most platforms, if you put something up, you'll get, maybe a couple of likes. But if you do just a kind of funny video on TikTok, you can have 1,000 views in a couple days. And it's like, okay, this is different. This is, I'm going to keep trying to get over some of the awkwardness and just have fun with it, like Michael said.
I think that's a great idea, to just try to have fun. Raven, friend or foe?
I think it's a mix of both. Before the pandemic, I definitely used it more as a tool for connecting with readers. The pandemic, being somebody who's high risk, definitely kept me, basically in my home for 2.5 years. So it was a way to then connect with more than just readers. And so in that regard, I definitely saw it as a friend. But, we've all seen where things go sideways or south and it becomes a foe. And so I think, with any tool, especially anything that's technology, it's both. Being a former teacher, I am not really somebody who's worried about being in front of people or a camera. It's just part of my whole life for the most part. but it's definitely been a little trickier, I'd say, after the some of the worst of the pandemic, to be now doing events again and getting back into that role. It's just a little like, whoa, there's people out there. Oh my gosh, when did that happen? So yeah, it's been a little bit of an adjustment, I think, for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh, it certainly has been, that's for sure. One final question for each of you. If I were shopping today and I have a huge shopping list and I'm trying to pick out books, I want you to describe for us who should be buying your book. So I'm going to start with Nathan. Nathan, who should I buy The Empire's Lion for? Can you describe who on my shopping list would be a good fit?
Sure. So if you've got someone in your life who loves action, intrigue, magic, and a blend of storytelling that's epic and sweeping, but also has lots of real intimate, powerful character moments, then Empire's Lion would be great for that person. And
Fantastic.
to add even more onto that, if you're not sure if you want to put money down, you can just sign them up for my newsletter and they'll get Adept Initiate for free to try out. So you can't lose, really.
It's a win-win situation. Go over to nathantudor.com, sign up, and you could try it on for size. Thank you. Raven, who should be buying Amaskan's Blood?
My readers tend to be anybody from the people who like YA all the way up to older generations, anybody who likes epic fantasy, especially epic fantasy with strong political intrigue and world building. I like to tell people my world building doesn't take 20 pages to describe a table leg, so there's that. But if you like your world building to still be in depth, if you are a linguistics geek like I am, anything like that, you'll love it. If you enjoy stories about what found family versus blood family is like, that's another set of group of people that would like it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And please make sure you visit ravenoak.net and find out more about Raven and this series and other series as well. And Michael, who should I be buying a copy of Keeper 829 for?
Yeah, I'm quite a bit like Raven in this regard. So I've had some, well received from young adult all the way up to probably mid 50s. I think it's really for someone who, one, doesn't get offended easily, who understands, this is fiction. So there's a lot of contentious issues in it. So I embrace, religion, and I denounce it at the same time. I embrace politics and I denounce it. There are some, gender inequality issues that are touched on by my characters. And then someone who really wants to, imagine where the world is going. So one of my reviewers said that, this is a very harrowing tale of the steps that we're making as humanity right now, that this could legitimately be where we are going. So in that regard, it's someone who may want to make a difference and see this, kind of fanciful, but not quite, totally fiction perspective. So I did go on Instagram and I made a video about who this book is not for. So you should watch that if you want to know. It tells you everything in about 8 seconds and it's perfect. So if you're not in that 8 seconds, the book is perfect for you. But I did want to mention that with Order 516 coming out, if you do go purchase Keeper 829 and subscribe for my mailing list, you get a free copy of book 2.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I can't thank the three of you enough for joining us here between the covers. I love the books, and when you've got more coming out, please join us back and keep us posted so we could share with our audiences. And happy writing. Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit betweenthecoverstv.com. By the way, at betweenthecoverstv.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.